Welcome one and all to episode 55 of Regarding Men. Do social workers hate men? The question is rhetorical.
Well, hello there, friends. Here we are for another episode. I believe it's episode 55 of Regarding Men, where we hold men in high regard. I'm Janice Fiamengo, and I am joined by Tom Golden and Paul Elam. And we're talking about the mainstreaming of man hatred today. We're looking at two incidents that are obviously related, and I think we're asking, has there ever been a time in history when women were not only encouraged, but even celebrated for declaring their hatred of men? The first episode or instance that we're going to look at is a private Facebook group. It's been around for a number of years and apparently has had controversy since its beginning. And it's had controversy recently when a bunch of women, as part of this private Facebook group, shared their stories of domestic violence. And it started with one woman asking other members what the most violent thing they'd ever done to their intimate partners was. She said, this is all coming from, not from the Facebook group itself, but from a report about it in the London Daily Mail. And this one member asked the other group members what they had got up to in rages with their boyfriend. She says, in a mad-ass rage at my partner, just wanted to punch him in the cock and stab him in the leg with a fork. Bad bitches, I want to know, what is the craziest thing you've done in a fit of rage? And instead of saying, you know, shut your filthy mouth, that's disgusting, or whatever one, or, you know, that's not a topic for this group. This is supposedly a group where women, you know, talk about sexuality and explore taboo topics. Well, I guess this was the taboo topic that a number of them felt like exploring. A whole bunch of women joined in with their stories of what they'd done, and they were very graphic. Many of them had lists of things. They included such things as throwing a chair through a glass door and cutting their boyfriend up. This person ended her account by saying, needless to say, he didn't smart mouth me again. That's for sure. Others responded with long lists of acts of reckless violence. Somebody stabbed her boyfriend with a fork. One threw him out of the car. One punched him in the nose. One threw bowls at his head. Another rammed him with her car. One headbutted her boyfriend and knocked him out, apparently because he was looking at other women. And it goes on and on and on. As far as I know, according to the report, nobody actually said, whoa, this is disgusting and horrifying. Many responded with likes and oh, ha, 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 and love it and respect and all that kind of thing. 2 days later, this thread was shut down, and when it was exposed that this had gone on, and the one of the administrators of the group was reported to have not really been particularly upset about the whole thing, just saying that she didn't really, the group was about many amazing things, she said in response to a question about this series of posts. It's about many amazing things. Only a fraction of the women in this group wrote on this thread. They have 173,000 members, apparently. So it doesn't define who they are. But the administrators did get together a few days after this series of posts was made, and they decided it didn't represent their values, so they took it down, and apparently the members that made the posts have been...
Oh my, aren't they the moral ones?
Yeah, aren't they? It didn't represent their values. I love that. No expressions of shock or horror or anything really, but it doesn't represent who they are. So there's that. And then at the same time, we wanted to discuss a case of a woman who posted on her Twitter page that hating men is a way of life for her. She wrote that hating men isn't a meme for me. It's not an online persona. It's a commitment. It's a way of life. And this received a whopping 190,000 likes on Twitter. The most disturbing aspect of this woman's tweet was that she identifies herself as part of the community of Black feminists and lesbians, and also as what she calls an abolitionist MSW and organizer. And MSW, of course, means Master of Social Work. It didn't take long to track down, in fact, I did not do this, a friend of mine figured out her identity. She has two different Twitter pages, this person. One is her professional Twitter page, and the other is this one where she is slightly in disguise, but she doesn't really take a lot of pains to disguise herself. There are a lot of cross posts. There are a whole bunch of selfies on this pseudonymous Twitter post. And there are also many links, articles in which she is mentioned by name. So she's not particularly worried about hiding her identity. The Twitter page is called K at Shea Butter Femme, but her real name is Christina Egbebiyi. And she is indeed a Master of Social Work. She received her master's degree from the University of Michigan, and she was their best student. In 2018, she received the Student of the Year Award from the National Association of Social Workers. So this is quite something that she feels perfectly free about tweeting out that hating men is a commitment and a way of life. And yet she sees herself as a revolutionary who is going to change the world and make it a far better place. I've written to the president of the National Association of Social Workers asking if they stand behind their award. And I've written to the dean of the School of Social Work at the University of Michigan, never got any replies. So that's where we stand.
Wow.
Some crazy stuff, eh?
Well,
Yeah.
is it though?
Yeah, it is.
The tendency, of course, is to be shocked when you consider the involvement of MSWs in the mental health field, and how can this possibly be? Hatred openly expressed for half the population. Yet I would venture to guess that part of what got her recognition was her views of men, because that's the direction that social work has gone. And it's been that way for quite some time now. So it started, as I recall, in about the mid 80s, things began to turn virulent, not only in the social work profession, but in the entire academic establishment for the mental health field. All the psychology majors, all this stuff turned to women's studies, turned to what's called feminist therapy, and it is by nature hateful toward men and blaming and practices persecution of men. So I'm not surprised that this happened. I'm glad, Janice, you brought her real name into this, and because I think it's important that these individuals be named and publicly recognized, for lack of a better term, for their work. It's an awful, awful thing. And Tom has been very well aware of this for a long time. I know that he has been expressing concern about schools of social work, what they're actually doing, because they do have a code of ethics that totally prohibits this kind of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
And nobody's holding them to the standard of that code.
Yeah, I've written a number of letters to NASW about this very thing, and of course, very little in response. But I put those letters on a website called menandsocialwork.org, I think it is. And it's interesting to go through those. And how can you have a code of ethics that says this, but you practice like this? And I go through thing over and over again. In fact, half of the stuff is on clinical practice, and the other half is on the educational side of things. And it's just thing after thing after thing of breaking their own code of ethics.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty disgusting, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked at the National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics too, and it's all laid out there. It prohibits the use of derogatory language.
Right.
It prohibits discrimination on the basis of da 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 da, including sex, of course.
Yep.
It tells people that their personal problems, they shouldn't allow their personal problems to interfere in their objective judgment and their work in the best interests of their clients. You know, it goes on, and she's clearly breaking every single one of those.
Every single one of them.
You know, in making this kind of a tweet, and
she's clearly a disgusting human being. There's just no. I mean, who else says stuff like this, and they're serious?
Well, somebody who believes that it's morally righteous to say it.
Right.
You know,
and how do they get to the point where they believe it's morally righteous?
Well, years and years of indoctrination to say precisely that. And that is the amazing thing that's been going on, as you said, Paul, in our universities, especially in the social sciences and also in the humanities, but where it impacts society perhaps the most is in the social sciences. And that, you know, that is it. Intersectional feminism is all about that. I mean, if pressed, I would expect that Christina Agbebi might well say that it's mainly older, white, privileged men that she hates. I don't think she hates her father. Actually, she has a number of affectionate tweets about him, and she has a number of I mean, really ironically, the day after she made this tweet, which got its 190,000 likes, and of actually relatively mild response. A lot of people trying to reason with her, a lot of people saying, you know, this is a sad recipe for unhappiness in life. I pity you, you shouldn't hate, you know, it's better to love, you know, all sorts of things. Quite sweet. One man even saying, you know, I bet you'd like me if you met me at a party. We could have a few laughs together, but that's not possible if you've decided you hate based on you know, an inalienable characteristic of mine, and all sorts of things like that. But she tweeted the next day, "Eat your heart out, MRAs." But the ironic thing is that she's actually interested, or at least professes to be interested in, a lot of the things that MRAs are interested in. She's interested in the high incarceration rates for men in the United States. She's especially interested
interested in those for blacks.
Yes, for black men in particular. I doubt she cares very much about white men in prison. Yeah, but black men are men, so
that wouldn't be racist, would it?
Well,
no, not in the least, Tom.
Not according to.
It's just it doesn't have anything to do with white people.
Yeah, and she does have a lot of tweets where she makes very negative judgments about whites based on based on race. So this is the whole intersectional schema, and she's clearly been taught that as a black feminist. Her pronouns, by the way, I shouldn't be saying she. Her pronouns are they and them. So this person has been taught that they are not racist or sexist in hating white men. And this has been going on, I mean, for years. I remember when in critical legal theory, the notion of hate speech began to be widely discussed. And there were critical legal theorists, and critical legal theorists are just basically, people in law who don't believe that law as it is exercised in the United States has anything to do with justice, that it's simply an instrument of white supremacist power. And so there were people, Kimberly Crenshaw, who's one of the theorists who's seen as responsible for the idea of intersectionality, Mary Matsuda, Richard Delgado. They wrote a book called Words That Wound, in which they talk about hate speech and why it should be criminalized, why it should not be covered by the First Amendment. And they explicitly limit the applicability of hate speech only to hatred by members of the so-called dominant or oppressor groups. So a Black woman expressing her justified hatred of the oppressor group, that is not hate speech. And they have long arguments why they, explaining why they believe that she would be exempted from.
That's
they've used that logic for about 30, 35 years now, that if you're a member of the oppressed class, then a Black person cannot be racist.
Right.
A woman cannot be sexist.
Yeah, their
of
hate
course,
doesn't stink is what it really comes
Right.
down to. And they have said that very clearly, and that is now in the mainstream. We hear over and over again that racism is hatred plus power, and supposedly, these various groups have no power, and therefore they can hate with impunity. It can't hurt anyone. So even though this woman, as a master of social work, which entitles her to be in supervisory positions of various sorts, even though she might well have significant power over many men's lives, somehow,
to their detriment.
Yeah, to their detriment, she's somehow exempt from the kind of outrage and the disciplinary process that would obviously come to a white man that tweeted that hating women was a commitment and a way of life.
There's an irony here too that's so unfortunate, because we do have real concerns in the criminal justice system about policies that disproportionately affect people of color. You look at driving while black. It's a real thing. It's an absolute thing that happens. The sentencing disparity, while not as great as it is between the sexes, there is a sentencing disparity. There is the crack cocaine versus powder cocaine thing that ended up with many, many black men in jail for the same drug that white men were walking away from jail from. These are very real problems that affect the system. But when somebody comes out and basically turns an anti-racist concern or an anti-racist agenda into a racist agenda, which is what she's done, then me as a white guy, I say, screw it.
Yeah.
I care less about the injustice. And it's
a terrible thing, isn't it? I mean, that's the way I feel too. I was thinking that as I was reading through, I've spent hours reading through her tweets. She tweets a lot. Ooh. And, I was thinking so many of her concerns, she has tweets where she posts about homelessness and, and men who have died in prison and all these things. These are issues that MRAs are concerned with. She could have productive and very friendly conversations about a lot of these issues. Their MRAs are more concerned about these issues than the kind of mainstream elites with whom her tweet would meet with approval. And yet, that constant, that sense that one is hated simply because one is white or male, it just makes you want to turn off. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I don't trust you. I don't, we can have no common ground. How could I get past a tweet like that?
Yes.
Nope. And of course, I'm sure the other side of the fence will argue, well, if that was enough to turn you off, you probably didn't care anyway. And I'm calling bullshit on that. The fact of the matter is, if you persecute a class of people, they will turn against you. That's basic human psychology. You can't ignore that. And this is precisely what she's doing. She's wailing powerlessly about injustice and doing everything she can to alienate the people that would help ameliorate that injustice. It's a sickness, I think. And I think it's a problem of evil too.
Yes.
We can call this groupthink or indoctrination in higher education, and a lot of contributing factors that go into the day that she tweets how much she hates me without ever having met me or knowing anything about me. But in the end, this is evil. It's evil thinking, it's evil people. Good people do not embrace class hatred. They don't, not in my book. And anyone who does is to be discounted as surely as though she had a white hood on.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That's what I kept thinking, that she has been given permission to hate through all her schooling. I'm sure she wrote papers talking about white supremacist patriarchy or white heteropatriarchal violence and all of these things, and was rewarded for that and championed for that. And so she's given herself permission and has been given permission by the wider society to hate. And that's the thing. I mean, we all struggle with various types of anger and hatred. but we know it's wrong. And when you believe that it's good and that nobody can accuse you of, of anything wrong because you hate, in fact, that you're going to be clapped on the back, you're going to get 190,000 likes for that and admired. And a lot of people did, said, yeah, a lot of men chimed in. I hate men too, and I'm a man.
Right.
One guy chimed in saying, hey guys, if you really don't like this, then you should work for women's equality, because when women are equal, then this kind of thing won't be allowed.
And he forgot to add in at the end there, can we please have sex now? I've done my groveling for your approval. Will you please pat me on the head?
Yeah. Yeah, because we know that throughout history, when it was socially sanctioned for one group to hate another, it was always because the group doing the hating was actually disempowered. Not quite, but anyway, yeah. I mean, it's quite something to see the twists and turns of the mental logic that somehow justifies this and makes it a joke or an exercise in postmodern irony or a statement of liberation.
I have a guess about all this, and that is that the whole victimization thing is playing a part in this. Because the more you teach someone that they're a victim, the more likely they're going to be to project that out onto somebody else, And I think that's part of what's happening here is people are projecting it out. Because have you ever seen a self-satisfied person who hates someone? Probably not. Probably not. People who are self-satisfied generally do not hate. So, it's easy to move people to a point of hate by telling them they're victims and ruining their sense of satisfaction with self, ruining their capacity to be in the present moment, and baiting them to try and find others who have similar hate. When that happens, boom, just like we saw in that Facebook thing, it amplifies out, it gets worse and worse. And I think that, in some ways, I think there is some idea that by pushing this whole victimhood idea, that is actually fostering this hate, the hatred.
Well, it certainly fosters the justification. I know if I see myself as a victim of burglary, if somebody breaks into my home, I'm a lot more comfortable with shooting that person than I would be ever with shooting somebody who didn't pose a threat.
Yes.
And I think that's just normal for human beings. If somebody's attacking us, if we really are a victim, then most of our behavior is justified.
It justifies our response.
In our self-defense.
Yes.
But guess what? This woman is a highly educated, successful woman in her field, recognized, living better than 99% of human beings have ever lived on the planet, with more freedom and more protection from discrimination than we've ever seen before in human history, and she's still a victim.
But that graduate school is teaching her that.
Yep.
They're teaching her that she's a victim. I talk with some guys who've been in social work school, and they tell me what's happening there. And some of these professors are just boldly hating men. One guy told me about the situation where they were talking about domestic violence, and they just tell him to shut up. You're a male. You don't know anything. You need to keep quiet. Listen to the women talk. And it's unbelievable what's going on.
We got an idea of what happens when we listen to the women talk on that Facebook page.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, it's just.
And I wanted to address that for a minute too, because in a sense, the story of this Facebook page is the story of a voice for men. There's a parallel here. The thing that I think brought the most media attention at a voice room that it ever got, and of course almost all of it negative, was an article I wrote called "If You See Jezebel in the Road, Run the Bitch Down." And it was a response to similar type content that was published at Jezebel.com with women bragging about inflicting all this harm. And I said, well, let's reverse the roles, or let's not even reverse the roles. Let's say, what does it look like if men decide that they're not punching bags and they're going to hit back? And I wrote an article along those lines, and they went nuts. Absolutely. I mean, it's 10 years later, and they're still bringing that article up. They're so crazy. And Jezebel has never taken the original article down. They've never apologized for it. And of course, we see the same thing happening on this Facebook page. You said 173,000 followers on that page.
Yeah.
How many of them expressed outrage?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to know. The article did not mention a single one. So, yeah.
And dynamics. When you're a victim, you can be violent, you can hurt people. It's all justified. You can stab somebody with a fork. And of course, if I write an article and say that the appropriate response to being stabbed by a fork is a short to moderate period of unconsciousness for whoever stabbed you,
yeah,
then the world will lose its shit.
Yep.
Because men aren't even allowed to defend themselves. And of course, I encourage men, if you're under attack, defend yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the thing about this Facebook group is that this is not the first time this has happened. If you look up, if you put Bad Girls Advice, which is the name of this secret Facebook group, if you put that into Google, a bunch of articles come up from 2017 when it had a similar scandal. And, this is part of it. I guess this is what happens when women are given permission to be bad girls, is mainly, I think they talk about sex and vibrators and, things like that. But they get into talking about how much they enjoy beating on men and doing terrible things to men, throwing bowls at men's heads, biting into a guy's neck so hard they can hear bone crunch and he's still got the scar, and all sorts of hideous things. And that just goes on. And the article, which was in some way, in some respect, this Daily Mail article was an expose, but it also ends by saying, well, on the one hand, it's offensive in some ways, and some of the discussions are unorthodox, but scandalous. There was a long thread about bestiality that got the group into trouble some years ago. But at the same time, it's helped a lot of women, and it can be quite empowering, and it's a safe space for women to talk about all sorts of issues. And some women have been talked out of suicide on the pages of the group, and it goes on and on talking about all these things.
And Castro taught the population to read.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. And I was thinking, imagine a secret men's group where men celebrated the things they had done to their partners, and people wrote things like respect and ha ha ha, love it, oh, sharing this, and all that. I can't imagine an article that would say, but it's also helped many men and it's been very empowering. And yes, there's a dark side, but it's really good. And on the other hand, it just shows the ridiculous double standards and our inability to believe that women's hatred and women's violence can actually do any harm, even though we see the results of it all the time. And that's what it ends up doing. It just reinforces the cultural myth that men can't really be harmed, that men deserve to be hated, and nothing that can be done to men really hurts them.
Exactly. And it takes us to Tanya Reynolds again, who says that women, even if they're the perpetrators, are seen as victims.
Yeah.
And this is why I tell men all the time, and I'm going to say it again here, guys, look, if psychotherapy can be a very helpful instrument in the lives of people used appropriately. But if you're shopping for a therapist, never go see an MSW. Don't ever see any of them. The chances are too much that they've been steeped in this hatred of men, and that will play out. Most therapists take 2, 3, 4 years of the beginning of their profession to learn to separate their own issues away from their clients' issues.
Really?
It's a normal process of becoming a therapist, is you learn that dividing wall. Well, guess what? When you're taught in an atmosphere of hate, you don't have the drive to say, okay, I got to sort out my own daddy issues or whatever issues I got to separate that away from my clients and not be a pathogenic therapist. So the schools of social work are cranking out pathogenic therapists. Stay away from social workers.
I would add, Paul, that there's no other profession that's much better. You know, the psychologists are the same frickin' way.
That's true.
The licensed family therapists are pretty much the same way. Any place you go, you're going to run into this. So,
and mind you, I'm not talking necessarily about LCSWs. That's what Tom is. That's a licensed clinical.
I am. I'm talking about them too.
Well,
hell yes.
It's a little better. There's better
disgusting.
education.
It's disgusting what's happened.
It is.
You know, when I went to graduate school, I was taught by people who were loving, caring men and women who were PhDs, who were helping people learn how to do good work with people. And that's just completely gone to shit. You know, I was going to tell the story before about the guy who's shut up with the domestic violence thing. About then the professor says, well, I think we should just cut men's balls off if they're domestically violent. You know,
yep.
She said that in class, and the men couldn't say anything. I mean, there's literally been research done on these guys and their perceptions of being treated like an underclass in these graduate programs. I mean, it's just disgusting crap.
I remember conversing with a woman who was contracted at a facility I worked at to come in and do groups from the outside. And back in the days when I smoked cigarettes, and I smoking a cigarette with her before going into group, and she's just puffing away on this cigarette saying, I love taking men's macho bullshit and shoving it down their throats.
Yeah.
And she was there to do a men's group.
What'd you say?
I said, well, you know, that really doesn't sound like material for a therapeutic alliance to me.
Good for you. Best response.
And she looked at me like I was a freaking alien.
Yeah, I bet she'd said that before and had received all sorts of kudos.
Yep.
Yes.
You know she had pats from men.
Yeah.
Patting her on the back.
You go, girl.
Saying, you tell them about it.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm one of the good men.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big part of this problem.
That's a good example too of how to respond to this kind of stuff. Because I think sometimes we're inclined to just hit back and say, fuck you, you jackass, you're a hating motherfucking, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the best thing. Your response was a good one. You know, that doesn't sound like a therapeutic alliance to me. You know, just calling a spade without returning it with the same venom, you know? It's hard to do. Oh,
yes, it was. And believe me, that wasn't what I was thinking of.
I was thinking you weren't thinking.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, that's what it takes a lot of times, is to keep it cool and to speak the truth, you know, without spitting back the venom.
Sometimes
not tolerating it either, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes I think with this stuff, like on the Facebook page and the women all chiming in, I stabbed him, I did this. There's always been, one of the things feminism has done is set up a very unhealthy competition between men and women. And what it's left a lot of times is that I see women competing to be scumbags.
Yeah. Yes.
And they're saying what they're really saying is that I can be abusive and violent just like a man can. So don't sell me short.
The danger in that is that women's in-group bias then takes over and couples with that, and they try and be more nasty. You know, they try and be more hateful.
Well, if you read some of the posts from that Facebook page or from Jezebel.com, they've certainly succeeded.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah.
But I think Janice's first question when she opened up was a really good one. Has there ever been a time in history when women have been encouraged to hate men like this? And I can't think of one. Can you guys?
Well, there was pockets of it, but never socially widespread. I know that one of the things that happened at the Seneca Falls Convention was that men showed up to support the women there at Seneca Falls.
Course.
And at least the legend has it is that the men were told, thank you for showing up. Please have a seat in the back and keep your mouth closed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wouldn't surprise me if that's true. But a lot of this goes back to Aaron Pitsey really dissected this stuff very, very well, in that in the late 60s, it became the leftist way to trade off the class struggle and replace it with a gender struggle.
Right. Right.
That men had to be the identified enemy. Well, it used to be capitalism and free enterprise and things like that. Now we could drive the enemy much closer to home and create that war between men and women. And man, they did a good job. I'll give them that.
They sure did. Yeah.
And we're victims.
Yep.
Of those terrible patriarchal men.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's such victims that they should be able to stab people with forks with no retribution whatsoever.
That's right. That's right.
Because they're owed that.
Yeah.
Man.
We're living in a crazy place, man.
Another one of these. Well, we've reached another happy ending.
Yeah, I mean, what's the takeaway?
Oh, God.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd love to see, more and more I keep thinking of, I'd love to see a march of women called Not in My Name. And women standing up against this stuff. That would be really powerful.
And I'm sure that would probably draw the same numbers of men willing to march to stand up for their rights.
Yeah. It'd be a pretty
be
small, scraggly bunch.
Well, I tell you what, to be totally honest, I bet you the women would outpace men. I bet you could get more women to stand up and say, not in my name. One reason being that they're still in the traditional community, as it were. There is still a lot of women that think anti-feminism is about putting men back up on their white stallions to rescue their day and to take care of them and to enable them for anything they want. And this is what they want. And we have some of those people in our ranks. And so I think a lot of them would show up. And there's other just women who are sick of hearing gynocentric bullshit that would show up. I think their numbers together would put the men to shame, of men who are willing to show up and stand up for their rights.
Yeah.
Because look, where were the men on this woman's hateful tweet? I read through a lot of responses.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was more groveling than
they're petrified.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, some people reported her, but the thing she didn't get suspended.
And I don't know what she meant by MRAs eat your heart out. You know, I get to wake up and not be her, so I don't think I have anything to be jealous about. Anyway, well.
Are we finished?
Another happy ending regarding men, another positive, end on a high note. They go low, we get depressed.
A lot of guys tweeted back to that woman, I really don't care. I'm happy to be a man. I don't care if you hate me or not.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
and that is a great response.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I would say that was probably coming out of the MGTOW camp.
Yeah, probably.
Hate yourself to death.
Yeah.
Fine by me.
That's what it
Anyway,
does.
guys, thanks for showing. And we will see you all next time.
See y'all next week. Have a great week.
See you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.